Oop. That's not exactly what we wanted to start with. If we click. Oh, it's okay. There we go. Perfect. So, that's not exactly what we wanted. That's also not what we want to start with. If we let it just loop for a little while, we'll get the echo. So, because we'll be talking over ourselves, talking over ourselves, talking over ourselves. If we let it just loop for a little while, loopy, loopy, loop, 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 and then it will be really, you know, you'll just get pure ASMR. Yeah. All right, we're done with that. Okay, so hello everyone. Today's going to be a bit of a short stream. My brother's visiting, so I don't want to stream for 4 hours today. But what we will be doing, I think, is we will be doing a little bit of a Q&A slash discussion session. There is a video that we have not reacted to or watched, which details kind of what's moving forward or what Victoria 3 is going to be covering moving forward. So I figured we would watch that video. Plus, we get to see two very handsome devs when we do watch it, so I think that's mostly what we'll be doing today, but also if people have specific questions, I'll be trying to answer questions and this type of thing. Is there no auto-privatize button? The auto-privatize button is... Here, I can show you where it is. There is an auto-privatize button. It's probably the best button in the game to click. The auto-privatize button is this. You pass laissez-faire. There's no auto-privatize button. It's actually pretty obnoxious. And also, what I really hate is if you... It gets worse than that in terms of the micro. If we switch to someone who has interventionism, and we take a look at our buildings, this button here will include everything we have built abroad that we have ownership of. So if you are playing the UK... UK is going to be a good example here. Let's find something that the UK owns abroad. So these dye plantations, right? Some of these are owned by the UK. If we go into buildings here, and you can work around this, but you can't use the UI here. And you look here, you see, hey, some of them are in Bihar. If you click this, oh, okay, they changed this. I think it used to be the case that if you would click this, it would privatize everything that's overseas. It looks like that's not the case. Okay, so I guess that's an improvement. Or small indie company. You hadn't even considered that? Just passing laissez-faire? That is the way. But let's jump into the video, which we already have queued up. And we can take a little bit of a watch. A little bit of a gander, if you will.
Hello, Victorians. It's me, the game director of Victoria 3.
That's him, the game director of Victoria 3.
Martin Unward. And with me today?
I'm Lino Claudius, and I'm the game designer.
Two strapping lads.
Yeah, and we're here to talk a little bit about the future-free updates of the project, specifically what will be coming in the next few updates that we'll be releasing.
This video is, by the way, on their official channel if you wanted to watch without my commentary or something like this, for those of you who are watching the VOD.
For Victoria 3. Of course, we already talked about this in Dev Diary 124, right before the summer break for the project, but we wanted to have a little sit down and have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion about
Happy Wednesday Giver, basically. Yeah, this is probably the worst thing that they did for this whole video, is they did not wish us a happy Wednesday at the start of the video, right? Or did I miss that?
For Victoria 3.
Yeah, and we're here to talk a little bit about the future-free updates.
That sounds like they mispronounced Happy Wednesday. But yes, two distinguished
specifically
gentlemen.
What will be coming in the next few for the project. But we wanted to have a little sit down and have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion about the points on the free update plan, what we plan to do with them, what we don't plan to do with them, and just generally try to give you a bit more information on what you can expect to see in the next year or so.
I would have also loved to have a button to only nationalize foreign buildings, and I don't think there is a button for that currently, because I think that's the metagame, is I think you nationalize specifically foreign buildings and everything else you want private.
On the project.
You don't believe this is legit? They're not wearing top hats? True.
So the first thing we want to talk about today is the Navy. So navies are important in the Victorian age in particular, of course, and we want to make them shine. We're not quite there yet, so we really want to invest some time into making the Navy a lot more meaningful.
This wasn't in the dev diary that we had on Thursday, where they were covering kind of what they were going to be doing for 1.8 specifically, so I'm expecting to not see the Navy rework in 1.8, but this is also something I really want to see.
And we want to do that with a various range of things that we want to do, right? So supply should play a much bigger role, right? And we want to turn ships into actual ships that you can build and equip and so on. And the goal behind all of it.
Currently, the abstraction where you are effectively not really punished for losing naval battles in a way that is not really representative of like history, because like if you like jump into game, the abstraction for the game is that the ships, the ports just consume. Okay, let's jump back into game real quick. The problem with the abstraction of the game right now is that your ports, the way that ships are abstracted is not as entities that are built, but just through the consumption of man-o-wars, and this consumption is constant. Regardless of if you lost a bunch of ships, you don't have to replenish, and if you already have a bunch of ships, it doesn't get cheaper, and so this doesn't represent having a big navy was often like this moving, lagging effect where like you can't just dump money into something and then have a navy instantly, and if you already have a navy, trying to catch up to someone who has this navy is incredibly difficult, like militarily speaking, and it also like this just isn't reflective of like what's going on. So what they need is almost like represent a ship as a building, and then like a construction queue that builds specifically not buildings, but it builds ships, and then when you lose battles, the ships get destroyed, and then you cannot field as big a navy anymore. And once your ships are all built, if you want to turn off the construction queue, it would get considerably cheaper. Something like this would be the abstraction, or you just keep building more ships, and maybe you can sell ships. Maybe you have ships for specific causes or tasks. And I think they're going to talk about it a little bit here, but we get a nice shot of Lino.
Is really to make a customizable navy that suits your purpose, right? So if you want to control the whole globe, as Great Britain, for example, you will need a very different navy than, for example, let's say, playing as Brazil, controlling the southern part of the Atlantic.
Yeah, I mean, navies at the time had a very different kind of purposes. Some, like Great Britain, obviously designed their navy for global domination. But if you really just be a regional power, or even just looking to defend your coasts, then you don't need like a big blue water navy. You don't really need dreadnoughts. You can make a more efficient navy. You can put your resources where it really counts. And that's a thing we would really like to introduce into the game.
So, but of course, there's other areas of the military that we should improve.
I think OPB, One Proud Bavarian, on YouTube has a rather lengthy post on how he would improve Navy, and if you wanted to check that out, you can look him up. And he's also much more in the sauce on me on like realism and representation. For those of you who don't know, he helps work on the Victorian Tweaks mod, which is probably the best mod for being the best simulator, but they take away a lot of like levers and tools that I kind of like there being in the game, so I don't quite like playing on the mod, I think, overall. But if you were looking for like the best realism experience, that's probably on that mod, and a lot of people play on it.
Improve on further. We have had the 1.5 update, of course, which was a major improvement, but we need to refine a bit more in the military system in general, for armies in particular. I have mentioned supply already, right, for the navies, so that is something that we definitely want to improve for armies as well. And also things like the military access, right, that is a big pain point right now.
Military access really right now is, you can enforce sovereignty, but that's such a silly like way of going about things, and the lack of military access, I mean, I've gotten used to it at this point, but like initially coming from EU4 and not being able to get military access and like just being hard stopped from certain battles is like, or from certain like engagements is just like so rough. But not only that, the fact that Great Britain, if they can get military access from someone, or like anyone, won't have to do as many landings. Like if you're playing as Portugal and you're just trying to defend against landings, and then like Russia sides in against you, the fact that they could get military access from Spain and hose the like crap out of you is like rough. The problem is like the units aren't in discrete locations and like they are in EU4, so you have to be able to create a front somehow with someone you're not at war with. I think is one of the problems. Wouldn't hurt to have something like a merchant navy, not just convoys either. Yeah, the fact that convoys are an abstraction represented, paid by the government rather than private interests that are getting paid money for freight is, I think, also like a poor simulation. Like the government didn't pay to freight everything; they paid to, they didn't pay for the convoys. They paid for like the escort of the convoys, basically. That guy doesn't even make 53 videos. Doodle's immediately throwing shade at OPP.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell on you. You're gonna get a scolding.
Well, for instance, you have the trouble
Shame.
like Russia not being able to reach Denmark, where in history they would be able to march their armies to other members of the German Confederation. So we definitely want to tackle that by making a proper like military access system.
Yeah, exactly.
You also believe that military buildings should not be able to be privatized even in LF, since they are static and used to war unless they even start to downgrade. So what I think is, I think you should be able to stockpile weapons and this type of thing, and the act of stockpiling should allow prices to remain more constant, but get really expensive if you run out. And that stockpiling weapons is a little bit similar to buying ships and already having the ships. Have you streamed EU4? I haven't streamed EU4. I don't have all the DLC for EU4 at this point, although I'm sure I could contact the community manager and just ask for the DLC, and I don't want to buy, like, the last DLC that I think I bought and then refunded was Leviathan, and so at this point I don't want to buy in, but if there was a demand for me to play EU4, I'd probably just subscribe and play it for a couple months. No, who's talking smack about OPB? That's Doodles, who is the person who does, the person who goes to the coding mines to actually put up Victoria Tweaks a lot, so he's definitely kidding.
Another point on our list when it comes to armies and military warfare in general is that we want to probably introduce a system for more limited wars. So smaller scale wars, let's say the Crimean War, right, for example, is a good case. That doesn't automatically involve like all great powers across the globe, so you don't have like World War I basically in 1836.
I think that this, I like this idea, but it has to be part of like a bigger overall fix with the war like declaration and resolution system, because right now, like it is just so like that is probably that is like the last remaining thing on the list of things that I like had a problem with the game very early on and said that these things should be fixed. To some extent, like the military is not like completely fixed, but it's like so much better than it was on release. But like the diplomatic play, how it is launched, and how wars are resolved is like probably the thing I have the most that causes the most frustration. Specifically, breaking war goals is like really, really rough. I agree as well, because right now, if I need ammo, I build a lot. They get downgraded because they don't make money. War starts, no ammo. Yeah, I really wish you could I think the solution is allowing stockpiles rather than... Because it makes sense that they downsize under laissez-faire. So...
yeah. No, I think the thing there is conflicts vary significantly in scale.
Hey, Dr. Draper, thank you for the resub.
The Great War to
for
tiny colonial
6
crossfire
months.
wars.
Big nice.
Every war, especially early game, shouldn't involve like the full militaries of two great powers duking it out.
What I think that they need here is like a cultural sort of thing where the more you mobilize from your mobilization potential, the more it upsets your people, unless they're highly jingoistic or highly nationalistic, and have this be cause penalties in the background for you, so that you don't want to have a really big mobilization in your wars, specifically early on, and that like a full mobilization should be more punishing to you as the player, unless it's like a defensive war. Yeah.
Over some small island or something like that. So having a system where we can really vary the size of the wars, and this is actually something that we are able to do to a totally different degree because of the military system that we have. It makes it a lot more feasible to have a system that limits these sort of theaters of war. Yeah. So it's something that's been on our ambition list for a while, and we're hoping to finally get to relativism.
Right now, they kind of balance this not causing world wars situation by making it so that great powers won't really want to ever defend against other great powers when they're going after specifically countries that are like unrecognized. But I think that might be a little bit of a band-aid.
When it comes to the historical immersion part of the future update plans, we've actually decided that we're not gonna go over it so much right now, and that's because
we hate history. All right, moving on to the next topic.
Everything that's there on the list right now are things that are and have been in progress for a while. For instance, making the AI play better with historical content, just adding more content and flavor and immersion to the game in general. And while of course these are priorities, these remain priorities, there isn't really that much to say besides the fact that these are things we're going to keep working on and keep improving with every single update until we're happy with the state that they're actually in.
Which is like, there's always more to do. Jumping back in the game real quick, but something that I hope they continue to do, which is that they update the resources. Like, so, for those of you who don't know, Baku has 240 oil here now, and this is part of the latest 1.7 patch. Persia got way more resources, and it does seem that they're going, kind of one place to the next. Apologies, the lights went out. I need to get the electrician to come in, so let's do this. Oh no, the front light, it's so bright. Alright, that should be good. But the reworking of the resources in various regions is one thing that I think they're doing like bit by bit, and I'm super excited for it. They generally seem like they're including more resources overall, and Persia was like one of the biggest beneficiaries, but also we see like places like in Russia. Is it really? Okay, it is Tula, where there's just massive amounts of logging potential. So, which makes Russia, like, the Russian land incredibly, like, valuable, but a lot of this stuff got reworked, like, Perman, Ural, and, like, these got reworked. I don't know if that's overall a nerf. There's a ton of gold in Russia now. I think they're gonna continue to add precious metal locations in a bunch of spots. So, let's jump back to the stuff.
When it comes to diplomacy, one of the areas we are definitely looking to make some improvements in is diplomatic plays. So right now, diplomatic plays are quite interesting in the sort of pre-phase of the war.
Yeah, diplo plays are 100% like what I feel needs to change. Add more flavor, 90% of countries feel the same. I think that they still have a design philosophy that they want the thing to remain as sandboxy as possible. And if you're not giving unique bonuses or potentials or like this type of stuff to countries, then you're gonna have a hard time making one thing that's meta for one country to not be the meta way to play for other country.
Who you can get in on the side, who you're able to get to support you, whether you can get the opponent to back down. But once it gets to the becoming a war phase.
What religion would you like to see updated next? I was very fond of the Persia and Afghanistan changes. Or region, sorry. I thought you said what religion would you love to see updated next. I was gonna say the nerf to the Muslim like religion when it was already the worst in the game was insane. But the region, I do not know enough about geography and history to like really have a strong opinion on where I think should be updated. Other than it's insane that all of Australia, which is a similar landmass to the USA, I understand is very dry in Australia, but they should have like more than 80 arable land. And right now, the amount of arable land that Australia has, we could jump in game real quick and like take a look at it. The amount of arable land that Australia has is just like, it's insane. They have like 80, and it's like, they have 20 here. And I understand it's dry, They have, 40 here, so that's 60. Another 40 here, so that's 100. 110. 125. 135. We'll call this another 15, so 150. 152. 157. We'll call this, like 170, 180. Okay. Less than this partial Texas for all of Australia. Now, again, and I can't emphasize this enough, and when I'm saying that, even though I have emphasized this enough, I understand that Australia is dry. I understand that it's very dry. There's no way a landmass that's this big should have an arable land of just like 160, especially when there's actually an enormous amount of ranching in Australia, right? And so you could make it so that some of the arable land can only have livestock ranches, and to be fair, this can only make cotton and livestock ranches. This can't make, you can't make like any sort of grain here, but the reason this is like this is because of the system where arable land is like tied to starting population condition, the amount of arable land you have, which is why every place in China has enormous arable land, because they need the arable land to fit all the pops of the subsistence farms. I, for a long time, thought that this creates weird abstractions and should just be bifurcated out. Nike's fan says, can they give Ethiopia more resources? I don't know if Ethiopia has more resources, but it would definitely make it more playable. Currently, the Ethiopia, for those of you who don't know, is the most insulting place to play in from a mappy perspective. So first of all, as Ethiopia, you start with really bad tech, so you have really bad mappy. If we take a look at AUSA, for example, and we take a look at local prices, we will see that they have 60% on their mappy. But secondly, they don't have a single province in all of Ethiopia that has both wood and iron. The insulting one is, of course, in Eritrea, which this is Austin, Eritrea. This is part of the strategic region where you have iron, but you don't have any wood. And then everywhere else has a little bit of wood, not a lot of wood, because we couldn't give Ethiopia too many resources, but no stuff. But yeah, the region I would love to see reworked would definitely be Australia. I was thinking about, like, in my head, I was like, I don't really know if any region should get reworked, but yeah, definitely 100% Australia. Also, most of the resources they have, one of the problems is they do it based on how stuff was extracted in the era, not like how potentially, if there was a ton of investment in the area, they could have been extracted. So a lot of places that are in the unrecognized world are under-resourced. Specifically, India has not very many resources at all. And I mean, I'm not an excavator, so I don't know if this is correct. Like, Andhar is the only place with coal and iron, but there's an enormous amount of resources in, say, Germany and Great Britain, because these are the places that where historically there was a lot of extraction. But I think that the heuristics that they use to give the starting conditions give definitely a huge bias to Great Britain, Germany, and USA in terms of resources, and so I think the rest of the world getting buffed up would be nice. I also think that some of the reserves should be locked behind technology. So, for example, you should not be able to build all the levels in Lancashire until you perhaps research like nitroglycerin and dynamite. And maybe this would be a little bit of a thing. Country-specific events would help a lot in terms of flavor. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of... Oh, there's a USA mod that's really good. Someone in chat might be able to mention it. That is really, really good in terms of flavor. And I think that I'm probably not going to play USA without that mod anymore. Some Nigeria and Senegal content would be nice too. Yeah. Thank you for humoring my weekly Ethiopia dono. We gotta keep it up. One day we're gonna do. No, Ethiopia is like an interesting region. Are you Ethiopian? Is that part of why the Ethiopia? I feel like you pick Ethiopia because you want me to suffer, and this is why you want me to play Ethiopia, just in a general sense, because Ethiopia is like the most suffering place to play that has content for them. Like, it's worse to play here. This is probably the worst region to play in, but there's like no content for this region. Tanzimat's kind of interesting. Yeah. What if Australia started with an arable land debuff and automatic irrigation tech to increase the arable land? This would also be cool. I think that it's also like just this weird abstraction where like China. The reason China has enormous arable land has much less to do with the actual land here and more to do with the starting population condition. And so I think that they need to find a way to de-link these two. But right now, arable land, population, and migration attraction are all tied together. The reason the USA gets a ton of arable land is because they want to push POPs into the USA, so they want this unused arable land modifier, and so that's why a ton of the New World gets a lot of arable land, but like there are a lot of places in Africa that should have more arable land too, but it's just based off of like the POP starting condition. Hail Columbia is the mod? Yes. No, you're American? Ethiopia is just your favorite Civ 6 culture? Ah, that makes sense then. Yeah, it's rough to play in Victoria. Let's jump back and let's find... We need a little bit more handsomeness in our lives, though, I think, so, you know, we'll come back here.
Base. Then, you know, the diplomacy essentially freezes, and the outcomes really aren't as varied as we'd like them to be. So some of the improvements we'd like to make is, for one, we should be able to negotiate an actual sort of deal in a diplomatic play, not just completely... like one side back down to the other, but I
think that's the spirit of the Diplo play, and the fact that right now, like, the only type of deal you can negotiate is just backing down and giving 10% war reps. Like, if someone sides against you that you weren't expecting, that you can't possibly fight, it just feels very rough. Especially if they side against you for, let's say you have subjugated Bahrain, and the UK sides against you to transfer Bahrain, and you want to subjugate Bolivia, and then they side in for transfer Bahrain. You should be able to just give Bahrain to the UK in exchange for them like seeing their way out of that war, because happily would want to be able to do that.
I'll give you this if you get this. Yeah. We would also like other powers to be able to get involved. And one thing we would really like to do is actually for wars to be able to sort of return to being diplomatic plays.
Isn't there things like subsistence rice, subsistence farms, subsistence ranches? Maybe the way to nerf the arable land and just change the percentage of subsistence rice paddies to take more population. They already did that. Subsistence rice paddies employ up 10,000 population, but this creates different, very substantive problems in that anytime you build something other than rice paddy specifically, that will just employ 5k pops. So you build a dye plantation, it'll employ 5k pops, which causes 5,000 unemployed, specifically for countries that have subsistence rice farms, which is already that's such a rough thing to do. Your grandparents were Italian, if you want to draw that connection. Yeah. Is there any sort of I remember playing the Turks as the in Age of Empires 2 and talking about it with my grandfather when I was a kid, when I was 7 or 8 or something like this. And my grandfather got very upset with me for playing the Turks because he was Armenian. So.
And to have negotiation and changes to wars happen in the middle of it. Of course, interests.
Yeah, the fact that you can't change any sort of war goals mid-war or enforce different war goals than you have at the outset, and that war goals can get bricked. And also the system of enforcing below zero, and all of this is just every single thing about the idea, the spirit of a diplomatic play and escalation and negotiating and jockeying. I love that. The implementation just really falls short in my opinion.
Also tie very closely to diplomatic plays, and they're not, well, excuse the pun, very interesting right now, because you kind of just declare them. Yeah. You have the ability to be in an area and participate in that area, but they could be so much more.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where we want to tie in the Navy that I mentioned earlier.
I'd love to see interests being more interesting too.
Way closer to the way that you currently declare an interest, right? So you will need your navies to actually control that interest.
Any tips for rushing recognition for smaller countries like Vietnam? Do you prefer subject matter or expansionist strategy? So just enforcing a bunch of war goals on great powers is kind of the way to get recognition as fast as possible. Are you Armenian? Yes.
Just for a longer period of time, for example. So we want to make Navy matter more in diplomacy overall.
And also for the different levels of involvement to tie into all this, because it should be a difference between I have an interest in a region because I kind of want to know what's going on there, and I have an interest in a region because I am expanding my colonial empire. Those do not represent the same level of sort of commitment to a region of the world, so interest should be able to reflect that.
Yeah, I haven't thought too much about this interest thing, but I do think that improving on that would be nice. Currently, you can also like abuse mechanics, like regarding interests, to be able to like dodge who's in the war in a way that I think doesn't necessarily make too much sense. Which was kind of in my latest tutorial video, talk about that a little bit.
You talk about trade. I'm already looking at the next category, kind of.
When it comes to internal politics, one of the areas of the game where we would really like to make some improvements is legitimacy. Well, we're pretty happy with the way legitimacy currently represents how much like political strength and support is behind the government. I feel like there's a couple aspects that are actually missing. For instance, there isn't really a sense of how well the government is doing. What has it accomplished? You voted a government into place, but what have they done with that mandate? So, for instance, winning a war, losing a war, pushing their agenda, these sort of things should make legitimacy move in ways that isn't just based on like what's the strength of their political base.
Yeah, would love decaying cooldown for what you do. Like you win a war, you get a 5 decaying cooldown for legitimacy, although maybe that's too much.
Yeah, it's a bit too static right now.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also kind of this is a fussy thing, but an important sense of legitimacy is like sort of the sense of national pride, the sense of national accomplishment, the like spirit of the nation. Do people feel like the nation is on the right path or the wrong path?
Yeah.
And while, this can be fussy, this can involve a lot of factors, we do think it's an important factor to whether governments rise and fall, and we would like to incorporate it into the game in a mechanical sense.
Something that they're including, and they mentioned in the dev diary that was released on Thursday that I'm just super excited for, is like, they've implied that there could be like a cultural underlay system. And if there, or like, as part of the discrimination rework, there's going to be like a separation between cultural acceptance and legal acceptance of like your people in terms of like discrimination, right? And something I would love to see is like, for example, how jingoist is your population, and see that tie into a mechanic like this, where if your population is really jingoist, you get more legitimacy, or really nationalistic, you get more legitimacy for winning wars. And if they're less jingoist, more pacifistic, you could perhaps even lose legitimacy for just declaring war, and get none for like winning a war, and have this shape your actions, and also give the cultural start position of different countries, make it substantively different enough such that it could inform gameplay and actually make countries not feel the same in terms of what you do with them in terms of meta, but also allow the game to still be sandboxing in that you could shift your culture, but your cultural start condition makes different countries play different than one another.
Where there is an actual tangible sense of national accomplishment that influences whether a government is able to get its agenda through, and also whether a government can be easily removed. Because if you have a very successful, very legitimate government, it shouldn't be easy to just kick them out of power. That should.
I think they're going to nerf abdication meta, which is going to be nice.
Of course, was an uproar.
Yeah, absolutely. So like legitimacy, another area in internal politics that we want to tackle, because it is a bit one-dimensional right now, is the acceptance or the discrimination of cultures in your country. So like legitimacy, we probably want to do something like a bar with like 5 different levels, for example, that have different effects on pops that actually fall under these levels. And then laws would influence what effects are actually present on which level and so on.
They talked about this in the dev diary, but like 100%, assimilation has actually just been completely useless as not completely useless, but so fringe useful as a mechanic since release, and it's just insane because you can only assimilate pops that are already accepted, and there's really not a lot of benefit from moving pops from being accepted to being your primary culture, unless you're trying to empower the petite bourgeoisie specifically. And I really wish that this was a useful modifier.
And this should basically provide a bit more dynamic and more tangible system for you to play with.
Yeah, but of course, another important factor to discrimination is changing the way it works to not be solely based on which particular law you have enacted. Because just because you pass a law saying that all cultures are equal now doesn't actually mean that the population in your country, have taken in this and that this is reflective of how they feel about the situation.
So this is the point that had me probably more excited than any point in the video, that there's there needs to be a separation from your laws and your culture, and this for me is implying that this is going to be the case. This is whenever anyone asks what would you change about Victoria 3, the first thing I say is the diplomatic play sucks, but the second thing I say is that I would really love a cultural system, and this is an implication that this is something that they're looking at, and we just mentioned it, the example of it being jingoistic versus non-jingoistic, and this affects your legitimacy and this type of thing. But a really big mod the Morgan wrote mod has all this here. Let's maybe pull that up so we can talk about it. The Dawn of Flavor. The dev didn't like that I called it Morgan wrote Dawn of Flavor Town in my streams, big sag. But here is this enormous mod, and this mod's a ton of fun. The problem, one of the reasons I don't play it is because it will kind of lag the game and make the game choppy. But and maybe not if you don't blob really hard and you just chill and you look to do some of the stuff. But you have academics, I think chemists are new, and you have a ton of events. You have writers, you have painters, you have musicians, this type of stuff, and this would play so well with an underlying cultural system, right? Where if your pops care about music and this type of stuff, you spending money subsidizing the arts would be just such a fantastic thing that you could introduce in game. You even have balloonists; they're full of hot air, and it would be I can't think of all the cultural categories, but if you had what you have for laws, you have a cultural system, but the cultural system you have less control over, and it maybe operates in terms of spectrums and this type of stuff, or proportion of what people care about. If your country cares a lot about the arts and you're just going to war all the time, them getting mad at you makes a lot of sense. This type of stuff. We see some of the different scientists. We have archaeologists, anthropologists, paleontologists, naturalists. But I would love to see some of this stuff included. As it stands right now, this adds a lot for the game to think about. So if you're wanting to play it as anyone big, or you're wanting to blob out, I wouldn't recommend this mod unless you have a really nice computer. But this mod is a ton of fun. I was really bummed out when the run I was playing on it started to slow down. Getting some fossils here. Thank you, Professor. Getting specimens, this type of stuff, and it would be also various feedback loops would be nice. For example, maybe focusing on natural history, right, with our universities affects our cultures in a particular way, different than our mathematical technical focus, which maybe makes us less industrial as a nation, right, and more something else, and affects our culture downstream in a way that it gives you a little bit of agency over the culture, but not enormous, and you can't just auto accept pops. And so maybe humanities anthropological focus, you want to do this because you want to get multiculturalism, or you want to accept pops better from a cultural basis, but the mathematical technical focus maybe is going to give you better engineering and this type of stuff. And so this will be interesting. When I add more content than the developers, Bogan wrote, people put in a ton of effort. Yeah, this mod is just super, super neat. I need to do a mod or a video reviewing various mods I've played, but I was super we are a fan of this mod. You could, unless you collect animals for a zoo, this type of stuff. But it would be so nice if there was like a cultural overlay system. And like I keep saying overlay. What I'm thinking is like, just like laws, how there are 15 categories of things, having 15 like cultural categories would be super, super nice. And this would also like let the game feel a lot more like alive and like this type of stuff, with like some of the richness of like what Victorian era people, especially the people who were engaging in colonization, were actually focused on, rather than, they weren't focused on the abstraction of the economy and the resources, right? It was more of a cultural thing. And so really would love to see that along with the turtles.
So we also want discrimination to have more factors to it, such
what about the politics mod? Better politics, also generally a fan of.
How long a culture has been present in a country, who has the sort of wealth and power, and just other factors that would influence whether a particular culture or religion would be seen as fully accepted or not in a country.
So the cool thing about these changes that we plan is that it allows us to do some other interesting stuff. So, for example, nationalist movements can change this way.
Yeah, in general, we actually want to do quite a few changes to political movements, where instead of political movements simply being a bunch of people who want a single law enacted, we want them to be representative of sort of broader forces across your country, whether those are supporters of a particular culture.
I think it definitely should be targeted support as well. Instead of the current system, what it basically does is it like is like, do you have a lot of radicals? If yes, did you piss off an interest group? If yes, all the radicals just support whatever made the interest group angry. And so it like, that's like kind of how it works right now. It's just radicals are very generic, and I wish that radicals agitated for particular agendas. They don't.
Nationalists, the religious movements, ideological movements, and to be sort of more sticky. So instead of the abolitionist movement, for instance, just being a bunch of people who want to go in and change one particular law, they're going to be a more of a long-term force potentially in your country, depending on whether the conditions are right for them to appear and stay. And they might play a role in influencing your interest groups and determining which ideologies pop up in your interest groups, because that's of course something we want to improve as well.
So this is like one of the things that I harped on, and you can watch my rundown of the dev diary. I think that this is not like, I think the solution has to be a little bit deeper than this. And so one thing that they're going to be doing, let's kind of just jump into game so we can talk about it. So one thing that they're planning on doing is making, based on like looking at a screenshot that is work in progress, so we don't have like a super good idea, but you making it more transparent who's going to be leader of the IG when the IG leader dies and this type of stuff. But fundamentally, for me, the real problem is that the abstraction where whatever the leader's ideology is, literally literary, that guy's poggers. The fact that this reformer is just going to overwrite entirely what all the petite bourgeoisie thinks, and is going to do it in a whiplashy way. So, for example, I can have a jingoist. Do we have a jingoist anywhere? No, we don't. I can have a jingoist landowner, right? And then he can die, and I can get a pacifist landowner who will completely oppose all the other things the jingoists wanted. And that's not like representative of the industrialists as an entire interest group, right? The interest group liked the guy who came into power, who was the jingoist, because the industrialist interest group liked that type of thing and put him in power. They wouldn't just have this weird sort of cognitive whiplash, although they might if like it's a reactionary thing where they thought that the jingoist guy did a bad job and switched to liking a pacifist. So the fact that the entire clout of all the interest group just does a 180 on what it thinks about stuff isn't kind of insane to me. And I think the site at which this is problematic is that the ideology is over-informing the degree of support from the interest group. And there's a few, like, something I have proposed to kind of offset this, although I don't think to a dev, is that instead of having a single interest group leader, you could have 3 interest group leaders, and proportionate to their popularity, they kind of split the interest group's clout. And if it's something that they all support, which is generally going to be plutocratic, laissez-faire, individualistic, the interest group base ideologies, then they all contribute their clout to the same thing. But if it's something they have a disagreement on, like let's say you have a market liberal versus a protectionist, where the market liberal will like laissez-faire and the protectionist will like interventionism, then they split the clout proportionate to how supported they are. And in this way, you also, if you had 3 interest group leaders, you would also not just have this enormous like whiplash of your interest group when one guy dies and it just switches to the other guy, because you would always be maintaining 2/3 of like what you had before, roughly speaking. The problem is like, how do you calculate interest group approval then? Because different I guess you could do a weighted average based on the popularity of the leaders, and what their approval would be. And I think that this would be much better. One thing someone brought up, Better Politics. What Better Politics does is it, instead of having like 6 interest or however many, I think is it 6 or 8? It's definitely 8. Instead of having 8 interest groups, they have like 20 interest groups. And so this is effectively kind of like having, multiple leaders per IG. A very similar thing. And so I think this would be so much better. So 3 times as many general rerolls. I think they're going to take away general rerolls, but also, yeah, it'd be 3 times as many general rerolls. The general rerolls are not like the only time we like really just like are like, okay, we're rerolling generals again. Is specifically for passing multiculturalism. Although a fully optimized like run, you general reroll for like 30 minutes a lot. We have never tried to do a fully optimized run because it's super tedious, but like if you can, we can re-roll generals over and over and over again for like 5 hours if we wanted the Intelligentsia to have 50% clout, and we could do that at game start as the UK, and we could do that every time we wanted to pass a different law. Hey Mercy. Oh, Mercy. How you doing? We're discussing the kind of future of the game a bit. Big nice. But this is like the change that they're proposing, in my mind, like just makes things more transparent to the player, where you have a movement at the bottom and the movement is telling you what they're likely to be next, but it's not what ideology they're likely to be next, but it's not fixing the problem in my mind, which is that the ideology is just like over-informs what they care about. Like to a degree, I think is a bit of a thing. Use generals to increase clout. Yeah, so that's another thing, is like you can recruit. That's what I'm saying with making the Intelligentsia 50% clout. Right now they're 10%. If we want to recruit and fire and hire generals and piss off every IG except for the Intelligentsia, we can make the Intelligentsia 50% clout. Will we be playing later? No, we will not be playing later. This stream's going to be a little bit shorter. My brother's visiting, so I thought we would do something a little bit different, and we're just gonna have a little bit of a shorter stream, and just be discussing and watching these 2 handsome lads. Kind of a future of stuff. We will not be playing later, though. There will be no play.
Like the overly random nature of which ideologies appear in your interest groups, and we feel this is a very good sort of opportunity to tie all this together.
I've never re-rolled myself. Don't you get like -50 attitude for every IG if you re-roll for 5 hours? Then you'll have radicals. No. Yeah, you can get -50 approval, but it doesn't matter if they have 2% clout. You can roll them into like having no clout. And so this is what you do. I don't do it because every run would take a really long time, but the people who are min-maxing runs super hard, hiring and firing generals for like 30 minutes is kind of a normal thing.
So you can see that this particular movement is strong in your country, and this might tie totally into the
many happy Thursdays.
They influence an interest group, and this in turn results in a particular ideological outcome inside that interest group. So it's all very interconnected. Besides these 4 major categories, we do also have a couple other points at the end. The first one of which would be trade. Trade is a fairly common complaint in the terms
people hate that trade is done by the government. I'm inclined to agree, but the fact that trade is not done by shipping and freight is not provided by private interests for the purpose of making money is like also just like this weird strangeness
of like how fiddly it is, how much time you have to devote to managing, and like what.
The real answer is you actually don't have to devote that much time to managing trade because things operate at the equilibrium level and trade just like adjusts levels, and who you're trading with is probably more important than what you're trading for like political reasons, and also because like getting trade agreements and then bankrolls down the line is like insane right now.
Changing and re-establishing your trade routes, and the fact that it can be very swingy. Like one moment you have a very profitable iron trade route, the next moment the trade route crashes completely, and actually figuring out why this happens, I mean,
skill
it can
issue.
get a little bit frustrating, and it's definitely something where we feel there's too much micromanagement going on. So we do want to change trade.
I think too many gamers are clicking buttons because they're there with the trade in terms of min-maxing. I think that we don't min-max trade enough in terms of like making the run like optimal, but also like the levels adjust when something becomes more or less profitable. Understanding like why a trade is good is like probably the hardest part.
Trade, we are looking at different solutions. The way we want to solve it is ideally by doing something like autonomous investment, where POPs step in much more into the trade.
There's autonomous investment for you.
Taking away the agency for government.
People in chat are already agitating for it. You found a bug that makes any nation with 1,000+ bureaucracy effectively have infinite bureaucracy? Oh, interesting.
It's the trade reason.
It swings every time you unlock a new PM. Yeah, this is one of the things that can swing it really hard. But then it adjusts to a level that's like more appropriate, and then the convoys get dedicated to other stuff. Or just becomes unprofitable.
Of course, because that's also something that happened a lot in the era. But precisely how we're going to change it, you're going to have to keep your eyes on that. But it is very much on our radar.
The thing is like, it should also trade with... Ooh, he looks so cool right now. It also is like, if you have laissez-faire, the government should be doing like none of the trades, and you should actually lose one of the like great amount of powers that you as the government have to like manipulate trade. And this should be one of the trade-offs, if you will, of going laissez-faire. Like one of the problems should be that the government doesn't get to meddle in trade anymore, like something like this. And like the fact that private interests provided most of the shipping and freight, like it wasn't provided by the government, so it doesn't even make sense that ports are a government building rather than an economic building, and that the government has to pay for them. The government had to pay for like the ensuring of the safety of these things, and so that should be the abstraction rather than... What do you think of a cabinet with ministers from ruling parties? I don't hate the idea of a cabinet. I think that is like less important than kind of fixing the interest groups themselves as they stand right now in regards to the ideology. But I would love to see a cabinet. Like if we go back to Morgenroth and take a look, like I think some of the stuff that Morgenroth does is really, really, really nice. Where, let's find something. The thing is, you don't want to make it every time there's an election, you'd have 5,000 decisions to make. But like here, we have, these aren't really cabinet positions, but they're like people who occupy the slot that's important for particular things. And so, for example, for art, you have a painter slot, an opera slot, like this type of slot. There's also more additional like slots off to the background. Let's see if we can find them. So we have like slots like this, and I'd love to see characters be like more impactful and like there to be a bunch of different characters, because I think it adds a lot more character to the game. Rather than it being like a purely disembodied economics simulator, right? Which like industrialization did happen, but a bunch of other stuff happened in the era, right? Looking right now for one for the arts, but not finding it. Just do that in free trade. Yeah, that's also perfect. If you're free trade, you cannot control any of the trades as the government, and instead the private interests entirely control the trade.
As you know, last year we introduced a new feature to the game called companies, and since then
this I'm super excited about.
Have gotten a few new tools in our toolbox that allows us to make them a lot more interesting. So the building ownership rework that we've done with the recent 1.7 update allows us now to actually take the next step and try and make companies a lot more like integrated into the actual simulation. So the big thing that we're planning to do is that companies will actually have an HQ in the world from which they can actually own actual building levels in the world.
So like instead of having the financial districts and the manor houses, you have financial district manor houses and company HQs, and they buy stuff all throughout the world in order to try and acquire clout and power. I think this is so cool. And I'm super excited if they like implement this, and potentially even playing as a company. Watching also the Dev Diaries or the Tinto Talks from definitely not EU5, except it's EU5, where you can like play as a bank, like an entity that is not a nation, but is like instead like a geopolitical entity. Like you can play as a bank. That's super cool, and it makes like thinking of like. I don't think Victoria 3 will allow you to play as a company, but like thinking like that, where the company is like operating autonomously within your nation, and if they could share some of the political clout, that would also add interesting stuff. Where like having to choose between like allowing free enterprise, like what should be really expensive about laissez-faire. The part where laissez-faire should be bad, is not represented in game at all. Laissez-faire should be bad because companies get to sink their claws into the government, your player. So if we had, a building like in here, we have the manor house, we have, the other one, the financial district. If we had another building that was the company HQ, and as the company HQ owned a larger and larger share of the economy, if they actually had a portion of the clout themselves, or something like this, or got to control political movements, or got to control things, is such that it felt like they were semi-parasitic, this would be a way to make laissez-faire feel like it had a downside, because the downside, like, of going, like, of allowing... there's definitely an economic downside to companies gaining too much power because they get monopolistic power, and this creates economic inefficiency. So if you had them both affecting like a power of the politics, but also if they acquire too large a share of the economy. So if all of the sell orders that are provided by buildings in your entire economy, if like 80% or more are owned by a single company, what this should do is it should make the buildings less efficient they should somehow increase prices, and this doesn't quite jive, unfortunately, with Victoria 3's price supply demand abstraction, because what happens in like a real economy when there's monopolistic power is prices increase to an equilibrium level that creates deadweight loss to society. I should really practice like explaining deadweight loss if we're going to talk about like this type of stuff, because I'm not that good at explaining it right now. But the way it effectively works is that prices are more expensive and the good is undersupplied, and so you could have supplied more of it, and this would have been good for society at large. But the company that has the monopolistic power themselves would have made less money. I don't know the way you abstract this in Victoria 3 other than like maybe creating a throughput malus or something like this would be the simplest way of doing it. So now you have this company that you don't want to get a throughput balance. So now you have to engage in like trust busting once the company gets too big. And so the early industrialization era, you don't care what these companies are doing, but let's say we had 2 companies and each has 40%, and we don't regulate anything at all, and then one company buys the other company. Now they have 80%. Now there's a throughput penalty. Now like our industries are collapsing, and they've like lobbied the government for protectionism, so we can't just import the goods. So now we're just like everyone's making less money or something like this. This would be so cool. I'm pumped up. I'm excited. Someone give me a towel. Yeah. So if we could have a system like that, that'd be sweet. Where the you get to see some of the like negative, like the robber barons in the U.S. Like you get to see something like that coming into like play. Let's pull this back up. Market inefficiency, yeah.
These are some of the
multinational companies do only have one HQ. They work in multiple countries, but have one HQ anyways. Yeah, you like. I know it might be the case that you don't want the company to be like localized in that way because you could just conquer it. Lack of competition minus throughput. Yeah, this is probably the best way to abstract it.
Bigger points that we're looking to improve and expand on in the upcoming updates, but this is of course not an exhaustive list. We will continue to bug fix, we will continue to improve the AI, we'll continue to look at performance, and just of course all sorts of small and big improvements to the game in general.
Quality of life improvement.
Yeah.
You could also affect the ratio needed, the ratio of buy and sell orders needed to reach a certain price. So you can make it, instead of needing double the buy orders to reach a really high price, you only need 1.5x the buy orders to reach the really high price. And this would create economic inefficiency. So that's maybe the way to do it. So currently, in order to get plus 75, you need double the buy orders. If you only needed 1.5 times the buy orders, then that means the prices would rise a lot. And that would mean that also, since you have more buy orders than sell orders, generally speaking, this means that you would actually prefer the price to be lower. And so the way that high and low prices cause a hemorrhaging of value in the economy would be exacerbated, and you would also get to see the high prices, which you would not see. The problem with reducing throughput is it doesn't increase the price. So it's like not the best simulation. So, but if you increase the ratio based on like, yeah, so that would be the way you would do it. If there's monopolistic power in Victoria 3, what it does is it changes the ratio required to have high prices. So that'd be just that'd be so cool. And then like if you're interventionism, you can prevent mergers. Or like this type of thing, or like one company buying out everything, so you can stop Standard Oil from like happening, right?
Yeah. Definitely. And before we sort of sign out, I also actually want to ask you, what's your favorite thing on this list?
I think that would have to be the company improvements. As you may remember, I was the one that kind of pitched this feature like about a year ago, and then we were like, yeah, let's do it.
It was a fun little pitch meeting because like you were sat down and you were like, you wrote.
Low prices do not actually destroy value of Vic 3, they just make less value out of thin air. Yeah, but relative to the status quo of base prices, they're destroying prices. Yeah, the thing is you do just create less prices, less good value, but like it's relative to a particular like status quo, it's destroying value. Like the implication of low prices is it's like relativized towards.
You had this thing you pitched to me, and I was like, yes, actually, let's do it right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not sure if you were expecting that.
No, not at all. I was thinking you were gonna say like, yeah, maybe in 2 years, you know, and then leave it at that. But yeah, then we actually went ahead and implemented like the first phase of this, which was really cool.
price elasticity was mentioned in one of the Tinto talks, affected by goods and events. I think Tinto might have the better way of approaching prices, is that prices in Tinto or in EU5 are going to happen at an equilibrium. In Victoria 3, they happen instantaneously, which is one of the reasons why substitute goods in Victoria 3 operate so weirdly, or is that they have to, because prices change instantly. And substitution is not actually based on price. It's based on the number of buy and sell orders you have, where if you have more sell orders for a thing in the market, your pops will want to buy more of it, which, roughly speaking, makes your pops kind of track price, but in some weird situations it doesn't. And so you can have scenarios where people will have way cheaper of a food thing that they could eat, but instead they buy the more expensive thing because there's more sellers in the market.
I think it already improved on a lot of the challenges that I saw, which I wanted to tackle with companies. And now we're basically doing the next step, right?
Yeah.
And we're making them really an integral part of the simulation, the core of what makes Victoria this game.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really fun things about
I'd be so hype if they made it so that like companies like feel like this semi-parasitic, semi-symbiotic like force within your nation.
Companies is the moment we started looking at this feature, everyone had an idea, and a lot of different ideas for how this feature can be built on. Like, oh, they can have quarters, they can have characters, they can influence politics, they can have their own sort of foreign affairs thing going on, like the United Fruit Company. So it's been one of those features where there hasn't exactly been a lack of ideas on how to improve this feature.
It'd also be super cool if they could have private armies in some situations where you like really let them do what they want
in the future. And it's definitely something that I don't think we'll ever stop building on so long as we continue to update this game.
No, I agree. It's the gift that keeps on giving. But I want to stress, of course, that we're not going to implement all of what he just said immediately.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. But we're going to try and make some significant steps here.
Cyber on YouTube says, and it would make interventionism more of a political choice, having tools to crush them should they become too strong. 100% agree. Like, the benefit of interventionism shouldn't be that it's like economically anywhere close to good, like as good as laissez-faire. It should give you tools to combat, like, you know, the Robert Barron type of effect. I also think that there should be like a neoliberal law in terms of economics. So like a neoliberalism law where you have antitrust type of things, but you're still like relatively laissez-faire. And that this should maybe be like an economic system after like complete laissez-faire. Private army mechanic could also be used for IGs in the game. Yeah, and it would be really nice for the IGs, specifically for like if they're going to rev against you, then they bring the entire army, right? Hey David, how's it going?
So what's the highlight for you?
So I think for me, there's a lot of things, of course, that I love here.
You noticed that clip? He needed to think. He just loved too much.
But if I have to pick one, it would be the boats. It would be the navies. It would be a lot of the things about
Who's
the navies.
Who's going to carry the boats?
I am a big fan of boats, as it turns out. And just the very idea of being able to incorporate the navy into so many more parts of the game, like diplomatic, military, colonial, the very core concept that the kind of geopolitics you can do, the way you can project your power as a nation, and the way you can conduct diplomacy should in some ways be determined by the size and shape of your navy.
So this book that I still haven't done a book review on. I was going to do something in Victoria 3 for it, but it's called Industry and Empire. It's about the Industrial Revolution, specifically in the context of the UK. Like, something that was very interesting is that one of the reasons why the UK was able to kind of enforce these, like, really unfair economic agreements and have also a monopoly on those really unfair economic agreements with various people all around the world was because they had the most powerful navy in the world, and that's not represented in game at all. Like, so the reason that they could exploit India or various other places was because they had like this really, really huge navy, and not because of like just the nature of the relationship in themselves. So No more capital army revolution cheese. Yeah, basically. And also, you could make it so that if there's like popular support amongst the IGs for war, or back to the cultural system, if you had a jingoist culture, that maybe they'd be willing to lend you armies in wars. And so this would give you like an incentive to go for like jingoist, but maybe if you go jingoist, it's harder for you to do the cultural stuff, like kind of thinking back to like the Morgenrot mod where we have like these like painters and this type of stuff, and writers and these things, and so maybe we don't get to play the cultural benefits, which is going to be bad for us on an international level, because maybe if you're hyper cultured, you can get infamy reduction and this type of thing. I don't know exactly what bonuses or penalties you would want to make, but like also maybe you just want to make this highly cultured country and just win like the culture wars as part of your thing, you know. And this tourism 5-person policy regarding SOL. The boats sound meh for you. I think it'd be a big improvement, because you could just block important trade routes overseas if nations don't comply. This is like part of it, but also you could just, if you can have more of a presence, if someone tells, you know, the tribe in Nigeria they have to do something, and another person tells the tribe in Nigeria they have to do something, the UK is like the one that gets their way. The Brits bullied others out in the ocean. Yep. It's weird that you can just go and colonize Africa if I'm Persia, for example. Yeah, because you would just get, like, intercepted, and bullied is the right word. You would just get bullied by British ships in the sea lanes. Like, what are you going to do? Like how they bombed Chinese ports in the Opium Wars? Yeah, so there's, like, Navy is not anywhere near as impactful as it should be. It's one of the reasons, like, the UK should absolutely unambiguously be the strongest start in the game. And they might be now, but I still am inclined to think that France is probably the best start. I'm not 100% sure, though. But they should be an unambiguously best. One of the problems is you can cheese release the UK, India. Or, like, the strongest for you, the player. What's the strongest? I think it's probably France, but convoy rating is kind of weird. Yeah, the US kind of does this with aircraft carriers too. Power projection. Yeah, you just like. Also during the era, I still think you had privateering and this type of stuff. So like, the fact that privateering a British ship was like crazy relative to a different ship is maybe a bit of a thing. To win a Civ 6 culture victory, yeah. I mean, like, this is another number you could run up is cultural stuff rather than, you know, your GDP. And I think that would be really nice if there was a play style to, like, go for that. And in particular, if the culture heavily affects prestige and you're playing for a prestige score instead of a GDP score, then like maybe that's a very significant trade-off to go jingoist, where you're going to get expansionary, but you're not going to get all the prestige effects of a high culture. You're sounding like you want to win a Civ 6 culture victory base. That's usually how I win in Civ 6. My playstyle in Victoria 3, like, the only reason I declare, like, Infinite Wars in Victoria 3 is because it's, like, optimal, not because, like, that's, like, how I normally kind of play games. I don't really normally, like, play that way. Research breakthroughs also, too. Yeah, so, like, it may be, like, it's harder to do cultural or scientific or this type of stuff if you're really jingoist. And maybe it's actually, like, a pie where, like, any gain in one particular aspect of culture is a loss in another. And so yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Oh wait, no, we still have another like minute left here.
It's something that I wanted to do in a Paradox game forever, and the fact that this is now not just a far distant ambition in some game at some point, but a sort of medium-term ambition in a game that I'm currently directing is something I am very, very excited about.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited about like the customizable parts of this, right? Like this whole feature set that we have planned there. I think that makes for a really interesting gameplay for the player, and I can't wait to actually get my hands on designing this myself.
Yes. And of course, we'll be.
I think they were still privateering, but it was like kind of exiting like what you were doing as much. Didn't the British captains and admirals just do what they wanted if they brought Empire's benefits? I don't know exactly as much about how exactly they did stuff, but I do know that the UK got economic agreements that were extraordinarily exploitative, and one of the reasons that they started to fall off is that they could no longer maintain those agreements on a global scale.
Coming with some details about this, but it'll be a little while. But at some point, you will definitely learn more about all of our big plans for boats. But as for what's coming in the more immediate future, you actually only have to wait until tomorrow to get some more details.
The Happy Thursday.
Dev Diary on update 1.8, giving you an overview of the update and what will be coming with that update. Yeah. So you can look forward to that.
So and that was of course the Dev Diary that was this last Thursday. Let's get a nice shot of the two strapping lads. Does anyone have any questions specifically? Because did want to kind of discuss upcoming stuff. I think we discussed the upcoming stuff kind of a lot through this stream. And this is, of course, going to be a bit of a shorter stream rather than the full-lengther because, again, my brother's visiting, and he doesn't visit very often, so do want to spend some time with him. But also wanted to make sure the flagship stream of Saturday, we did at least something. I know it's beating the dead horse, but the entire war system in Vic 3 is still so awful. I like the idea, but the implementation 100% agree. This is the thing I complain about, like, kind of most, is the diplomatic play is kind of just not very good. I really like the idea in theory. When they were doing like dev diary or dev videos and they were explaining the diplomatic play, I thought it sounded like the coolest war system ever. And then then I got in the game and the nightmare began. No, like it's like and then I woke up and then the nightmare began. But like the diplomatic, it's like at least now it's a lot more transparent for you, the player, who's going to join in this type of thing, and it's been improved a lot. But I still am not a fan of it. Maybe trade and Navy rework can go together. I think that this is a good idea where like getting naval power projection allows your private industries, your private traders to do better, but they should be private industry in general, and the degree to which they're private should be dependent on your trade law, whether you have free trade, protectionism, and also your economic law, laissez-faire, this type of thing. And and maybe like your power projection gates the amount or the places you can ship, and maybe there's like a trade range thing or a safe trade range where if a route doesn't look very safe, private industries won't want to do it. So like everyone trading with China like all the time, always, for silk and grain and this type of stuff. Maybe you don't have enough Navy power projection as Portugal to make your traders feel like that is safe enough. The Vic 3 war system is perfectly balanced, with no exploits. Diplo plays end up making the player just want to go to war, and back down just cause potential war goals, so you reload. Yeah, so pattern's like very militaristic, but if there was a cultural system where going war a lot made you jingoistic, and being jingoistic was bad for other things other than going to war, maybe you could get punished. The infamy system would maybe need to be reworked too, because right now infamy just feels like a resource. It feels like if you're not decaying infamy, you're just like wasting a resource. So it feels like you have to just constantly be at war. What DLC do you think is next? Also, why is the Japan DLC with beautiful UI, skin paper, and all that? I'm wondering where they're at with the. So based Doodles, if let's kind of jump back into the game. Maybe the game's gonna be. I know these guys are handsome, but maybe the game's gonna be a little bit better for talking about things. In terms of regions that we think that there's going to be a DLC for next, I assume that's what you mean. What DLC do you think is next? I mean, I think that the boat DLC is next. Because next, 1.8 is free update. 1.9, I think it's going to be the boat DLC. Something like this. But in terms of what regions, if it's based... if the amount of which views I get to any degree informs what areas they might rework, I think that, that's not how I think it necessarily works, but that's one way I can gauge popularity. We will see some sort of China regional work, Japan regional work, Germany regional work, or maybe even a Middle East rework would be something that could be done. Out of like any European country, I think Germany gets me the most views. When I do Germany, I think the USA already has a bunch of stuff, right? France has already had their thing. Italy doesn't get that many, like, just processing it from a views perspective, Italy doesn't get that many views. People just, like, kind of hate when you play Great Britain. So that would make a lot of sense to me. Next DLC, Austria for sure. Yeah, so if they decided to make it the culture DLC, that would definitely make a lot of sense. I think that if they made it the culture DLC, doing Austria and to a lesser extent Prussia would, as an emphasis, would be like make a lot of sense. Companies with some agency will be so nice. I think so. I think it'll like add like a lot of depth. Welcome, Technocrat. We talked about this a little bit, but like the companies eventually, if the companies get too big, introducing a malice in the form of, and this is what I think is really exciting, where market price gets to higher prices at a lower ratio, so right now you need twice the buy orders than the sell orders to get to plus 75, but if you only need 1.5x the buy orders to get to this higher price, then this would create a lot of economic inefficiency. And so if having monopolies created worse prices in your market, which is exactly how they like should operate, as a result of the company acquiring too large a percentage of the overall industry, this would be a very cool way of doing it. As well, getting they give you benefits at first, but then it's semi-parasitic, and that interventionism would give you political powers to fight back against them, and then also the companies giving like perhaps some amount of clout in doing this stuff and just being kind of annoying. Didn't they say stuff in the menu that they mentioned is it's going to be free? So the next 1.8 is going to be free, but he asked about the next DLC. So that's, I don't think Navy's going to be in the next update. My assumption would be the boat patch and war stuff would be in a patch. And all the war-related stuff is going to be in a patch, a free patch. Yeah, so maybe we get some sort of cultural thing, and Austria is the one. I think that would make a lot of sense. They call it the Great Chin. Not to be confused with Great Ching. Do you think a Pop's basket choices needs upgrade or fixing? I would like to see it fixed. I don't know how you fix it. So currently, oh, you mean in terms of what they buy? Well, I know I shake my fists at the devs a lot in regards to 2 PMs that are just awful. And that's the automobiles PM. So currently it's not worth it to turn on automobiles. And so in terms of consumption, we like it when our pops consume 0 automobiles. But also, the chainsaws PM is just terrible. I think the devs almost don't want to change it just to troll me at this point. I complain about the chainsaw PM like literally every time. It's just like so bad. It's like completely unusable. But do we need basket choices, need upgrading or fixing? I think that what we're seeing is going to be a big improvement where the basket of goods that your pops are buying, and they talked about this based on the teasers with the food, the basket of goods that they're buying are now, if they run out of food or food gets expensive specifically, even though it's not like 100% of what they're paying for, this will make them more mad than like other goods getting expensive. I think that that's a big improvement, because when food gets expensive, that makes people real mad. When clothes get expensive, you just wear the underwear with the hole in it, right? But when food gets expensive, you starve. There's a substantive difference there. Greece is not Middle East. Not yet. I'm just gesticulating here, man. I'm trying to make sure we get Egypt in the circle here. You know what? We're getting a Greece/Middle East rework mod. There we go. Like to play Africa countries. Could get an Africa rework. I think that that's unlikely, but I mean, I think I really want to see Australia resources get reworked more than any other resources, so I keep kind of hoping for it. I agree it should be Germany, no bias. Well, like, I actually have, like, a large amount of German viewership, in my opinion, considering, like, English ESL for, like, most of the Germans, right? I assume it's, like, more comfortable to watch in German, and, like, I think there's a pretty big German streaming right now. If I'm not mistaken, Karasak was live, or he was live when I went live. There's a pretty big German streaming right now. Yeah, there we go. I'm technically German, but yeah, he is streaming German right now in, or sorry, no, he's streaming Manor Lords. Wait, what? I'm not sure what he's doing. This thing says something about Manor Lords. It's a little bit rough because it's in German. What do you think about incredibly small economies having unreasonably high SOLs? So one of the ways you increase SOL is by having not a lot of pops, so... do you think a currency power system should be implemented? Maybe. I know there's an economic rework mod, or like an in-depth economics mod. I thought that so it's like really hard to balance and avoid exploits with that type of stuff. And I'm not sure... My general opinion what they have been choosing to update has been that they choose to update economic stuff a little bit too much, even though economics is like what I'm most interested in game, and that they should try and fix the things or change the things that are really, really frustrating to new incoming players. And I think more than anything else, the thing that's frustrating to new incoming players is the war system. And by the war system, I don't mean the way wars are fought, although I think a lot of newer players don't really like that either. But the declaration and resolution of war, I think is... I think that they should focus on that over everything else. The thing is that's not a very sexy thing to do, and I think it would require a lot of effort. And I think when you're trying to sell a DLC... you can't just be like, oh, we reworked the diplomatic, or I mean, I guess you can, but the war system, like, getting reworked is hard to visually show off in a feature way that it makes people excited, I think. So they have to either do that in a free patch, so 1.11, maybe we see that. Racial and social Darwinism DLC where you can improve your race and racial hierarchy. Not like this. Oh. But that was... People were really into that at the time. I think people don't realize, like, if you study the history of psychology, and psychology in the U.S., the U.S. was super gung-ho about eugenics and social Darwinism and all this type of stuff until they joined World War II. There was a bunch of research, like, trying to prove the inferiority of some races, you know, like, obviously, you know, which, like, the way their research goes. And the fact that there was a ton of anti-German propaganda on the basis of the racism and xenophobia towards the Jews, as soon as this started kicking in, basically all the research dried up in the USA and became very taboo. But, like, it was a reactionary to the villainizing of Hitler on that basis because he was our enemy in the war. Not based on some sort of, like, oh, we realized we were so wrong. Or, I mean, it was that to some degree, but, like, it was, like, how should I say? It wasn't as, looking at it through the lens where it makes the USA look good is, I think most people just be like, oh, they thought it was wrong, where, like, the USA was, like, doing the exact same, or the sciences in the USA were doing, like, the exact same type of, like, social Darwinism, like, eugenics, like, type of, like, research, like, this type of stuff that was, like, popular with Hitler. Do you get the numbers from the spreadsheet from the game code files? No, I just look in game. I don't go into the game files too often, and so I read through the defines a little bit for my last tutorial on ownership, because there wasn't a way for me to like look in game to figure out what was going on. And I tried a lot for ownership in the financial districts and this type of stuff, but I generally am not a read through the defines, like trying to figure stuff out type of player. Have you seen pictures on the Paradox forum? They didn't show in the YouTube video, but they're really important to see. Can you maybe give a link? We should also have monopoly speaking, dictating, for example, oil. Monopoly speaking. I don't know what you mean by speaking. Soon we will have Chiquita Inc., a wage war in South America for banana plantations. It do be like that. I think that, like, also, if you have a really big company and they have a private army and the company decides to invade a foreign nation, I think that'd be a sweet thing. We should be able to create Fed, like the interest rates and this type. Well, so having interest rates and manipulating interest rates and inflation and this type of stuff, there should also be cyclical stuff. A monopoly wouldn't reduce prices any more than a normal company, so it should only change the upward price change. Yeah, I'm talking specifically for the upper threshold. For the lower one, I'm not saying I think it should be 1.5. This should still be 2. But for the upper threshold, it changes to 1.5 or something like this. Or it scales up with the amount of, the proportion of the industry that they own. So if they own, like, 33% or something, it's still at 2x. But as soon as they start owning more than 33%, towards 100%, it like scales to like 1.25 or something in a linear way or something like this. I don't know if that would I don't know if that would create problems with the way markets and stuff are calculated. But also it would make it harder for you to export because the price goes up. So then the company would be just like more like local, right? And I don't know if that's what you want to do, because you increase prices, now it's hard to export. But I suppose if you're supplying most of the foreign goods, that exporting won't be a problem. I think it's more transparent if they just made the equilibrium price point higher overall. But you generally won't be hitting equilibrium. So if someone has a monopoly, the thing is like your construction will often be dedicated towards stuff that has high prices anyways. So if someone has a monopoly and this is supposed to increase the price relative to baseline, the price will almost never hit plus 75. So increasing the cap to plus 90 doesn't really do anything. Or doesn't really represent the monopolistic power. Where the monopolistic power, the price would always go higher and the supply will decrease. And by making the ratio different, this will also decrease the... I think that this will also, like, overall... Will it decrease the supply? Or increase the supply? It would increase the supply because it makes the things more profitable, so you build more of it. But increasing the price also increases... another thing I really like about that is the abstraction, is increasing the price of the good also increases the profitability, which the monopolistic power should give more profit to the industries. And so artificially inflating the prices does exactly that. The best DLC would be a Great War 1 with a crisis system. I feel like a lot of players aren't playing past 1900 at this point, that maybe that'd give people a reason to play past 1900. I would like to see a cultural rework before a Great War rework. All these changes will make Vic 3 a completely different game. It's changed a lot since launch. Yeah, I mean, I think that if you gave people like this enormous cultural system that was like the law system, and then like you implemented like a lot of the Morgan wrote stuff, you know, I think that that would give like people a different thing to play for. Like, super interesting mod. It just like I just couldn't play deep with this mod because it lagged me out. I think I was playing Austria though, so I could have picked someone way smaller, which would have just generally caused less lag, right? So, have you seen a Greek man? What do you mean? Chainsaws are actually good. The numbers don't take everything into account. Ooh, we get a, what is that, a bits? Oh, thank you for the 3-month subscribe, Razdies. Happy Saturdays. Not Jewish way. All these changes make the game sound more like Vic 2. Thank you for the bits. I haven't played Vic 2, so I can't, like, comment on it. I have, like, 60 hours, which is the equivalent of not playing. Isn't the Middle East basically a desert Balkan anyways? Oh, I'm a little behind the chat. Yeah, all revolutions have in common regardless of ideology and time. Food shortage and starving people. Yeah, so this is, like, one of the reasons I'd really love to see... This price getting expensive should make people way more pissed than anything else, yeah. I'm German. I'm a quarter German, a quarter Armenian, an eighth English, an eighth Welsh, and a quarter Mexican. But the Mexican, like, proportion of me is probably more Spanish than average. If they do boats and trade rework, I'd want to include shipping trade and canals, so places could rework be Panama. So places to rework would be Panama and Egypt. Yeah, the Panama Canal currently... The canals, as they stand, should give you way more than they do. They should be way more important. Like, one of the reasons the UK, like, really thumbed their pie into the Middle East was just over the Sinai Canal. And so, like, it was one of the last places for them to reach. Germany also gets a lot of love, but Germany is also, like, probably the most satisfying... Playing Prussia and then forming Germany is, like, if you really want to get the dopamine stimulation, that's, like, a really good, like, run to play, because, like, getting giga huge, like, feels really good. But then you're just, like, massive, and it's like, okay. Yeah. I think they should rework the war system, regardless of being sexy, or this game's gonna be pretty dead soon. Yeah. I think that what do you mean by the game being dead? Because you don't attract new players if the if the new patch doesn't look interesting, you just don't attract new players. Right? Measure the skulls, basically. I mean, like, now it's uber taboo to do any sort of, like, racially oriented research, like, in the US. Like, that's even remotely resembling it. Like, a good way to get completely ostracized in psychology is talking about or wanting to do research into IQ differences between races. Which is really stupid because, there's, like, other research that demonstrates that IQ isn't just biological. It's, like... It's definitely, like, it's not just a nature thing. It's 100% a nurture thing. It just has this perception that it's a nature thing. And so, like, if there's cultural differences between races, or that there's stigma, or people who are raised in less affluent or stimulating, like, environments, there's going to be a difference in terms of, like, IQ. The thing is, IQ is just always relativized towards 100 for your cohort, your age cohort. So, like, the average IQ of all 18-year-olds is 100. The average IQ of all 50-year-olds is 100. But if you gave the 50-year-olds the 18-year-old IQ test, when the 50-year-olds were 18, they would score lower than 100 on average. IQ in terms of, like, absolute ability to do well on IQ scores tests is going up over time. As people transition more to abstracted ways of thinking. And one of the research points of this is they go to a highly, highly rural place in, like, Russia, for example, I think is the study I read, and they gave people IQ tests. They were terrible at them. And so, but if you live in a, like, much more modern environment, you're much better at IQ because of what it's testing. Now, the people who they, like, tested in some rural area in Russia, I don't know which area that they tested. I don't know if it's anywhere near here. But one of the things that they noticed as well is there's other things that aren't tested in IQ that people in rural areas are way better at, which is, like, they know every single tree where they live. which is a different type of intelligence and is not pattern recognition at all, which is what IQ tests. But it's like if not knowing which tree you're by or where the water is like important to your everyday life because you die of thirst, then it's way better to be better at that than recognizing that like the squares are in a particular pattern relative to the triangles, which is like what IQ tests. But like getting back to the point is like you could actually you could do meaningful research based on IQ, but it's completely taboo in psychology because people do not want to appear in any way like the xenophobic or this type of stuff. And like an example of like how you know it's also like there's like a cultural element is like and this is why one of the reasons why they don't like SAT tests is like if those of you who took your SAT test and you remember that you had to fill out the like demographic stuff after the test, the reason why they do that is there was a study where if you fill out the demographic stuff before the test and you are reminded of your race, and your race is is a race that is perceived as being academically inferior in terms of the culture, you will actually perform lower on the IQ test than if you were not prompted to say what your race was, so that's why they make you do it at the end of the IQ test. So that bias is not introduced into your test. A little bit of a rant there. Hitler was inspired by U.S. segregation laws. He thought that they were too extreme. Yeah. Cranial measurements DLC, not like this. Phrenology. Phrenology is fun to say though. Phrenology. Like, makes me think of the Sesame Street song? Phrenology. Phrenology. A 30-70 ratio of it's so wrong to the people that are infamous are doing it. Here in Greece, we have such regards Brits that we even spit on their face. That reminds me of a quote by a Greek person, Diogenes, who's an ancient Greek philosopher, who has the absolute mad lad quote of, "In a rich man's place, there's no place to spit, or in a rich man's home, there's no place to spit but in his face." What are the differences in tariffs and how does it affect price? Okay, we could talk about this a little bit. And just a little bit. So for the most part, you just shouldn't tariff. And this is actually not a system that I know that well, but the different tariff systems will be better at different things. And I have to think my way through it a little bit. But mercantilism versus protectionism, one of these is, I forget which, is better at preventing exports, and one of these is better at preventing imports. But the more meaningful difference is that under protectionism, your trade centers are operated by capitalists and they have a better investment pool contribution. So you would just want protectionism anyways. But tariffs are not useful for generating revenue. And instead what you want is bigger volume of trade, because what you want is the trade to create buy and sell orders. So if we are going to import a bunch of grain, we would rather import a larger volume of grain and depress grain down in price in terms of our trade strategy overall, than actually make money through tariffs. And so you actively don't want a tariff. And so unless you are playing multiplayer and you are trying to tariff specifically to prevent someone from dumping goods, like for example, let's say there's a Russia player, right? And Russia has really good economic bonuses for wood, and you want to de-peasant, and the Russia player is dumping wood into your economy, depressing the price, and they can produce it more effectively than you. It's possible that for that, what you would want to go is let's see, I forget exactly how the tariffs apply, but you would want to protect domestic supply of the thing. And so whichever of these gives the bigger tariff for protect domestic supply, so protectionism, would be better for defending yourself in multiplayer from someone swooping up the good industries by exporting to you. And the reason why you couldn't just beat Russia, even though they have a mapping penalty, is because they have states like Tula, which can build up to economies of scale of 51 even, and also they have the logging. Oh, Tula, it has. Wait, what? It has that massive logging potential, but it doesn't have. Okay, well, it doesn't have the 20% logging throughput bonus. What I'm wondering is if companies will only construct buildings included in that company, buildings part of the supply chain, or in building. I imagine they could do it so that they would just have a heavy bias towards acquisition. But I don't think the companies themselves would be constructing the stuff. But maybe they would. But I would assume they just have a bias towards buying these things. Yeah. Monopoly get more profit at a lesser supply because they are big, so they can affect prices. Yeah, so... yep. I think we've talked about it a little bit. I think that the abstraction of it taking less of a excess of buy orders to increase price is definitely the way you would want to do it. Speaking of war, why not a 7-year war instead of a great DLC? Would tie in neatly with them giving Austria, Prussia more content in general. Yeah, this would be good. I think that Germany's going to be. I think in terms of in Europe, Germany's next. And the question is it going to be in Europe or not? I think Australia needs the resource rework more than any other country, but I also think that Australia is probably a relatively smaller market. And then Great Qing and Japan are just they're enormously popular. So many people have requested Egypt recently, and we'll be back with the Egypt run next time we're kind of playing on stream, I think. Pennsylvania needs a port. I looked into this a bit. I'm kind of the same opinion. It's a little bit rough. So Pennsylvania, it's not on the coast, but it's this is a major navigable river, and at the time of the start of Victoria 3, I think Pennsylvania's, the port in Philadelphia is the biggest port in the USA. Which is so it's kind of insane that they don't have a port. Also, on map, Philadelphia is not this far from the ocean, I don't think. On an IRL map. Canal should definitely give you more income, like minting or something. For every... for the amount of trade that goes through the canal, you should get paid. So if someone is having to ship a whole lot less through the canal and saving a bunch of money on convoys, some of that savings of the money on convoys should get passed on to you, the canal owner, rather than just a flat minting, because it should be proportionate to the volume of trade that goes through it. We got to take a closer look at the company, though. The canal companies, I definitely think I underuse the canal companies, because not only is 50K a pretty reasonable free money modifier. At a certain point, it's if you're in the billions in terms of your economy, it's it's gonna fall off. But also, is the canal company in here? Oh. Is it the Panama Canal Company? Now this is alphabetic. And it hurts our souls a little bit. Because I want it to be... Or it's not alphabetic? What the hell is... Is it internally alphabetic? Did I just skip over the Panama Canal Company? No, it's just at the top and I can't read. The thing that is crazy is that the throughput on trade centers is actually good. Because trade centers, it just increases the inputs and the outputs, but the inputs are let's find a trade center. So it just increases your weekly balance basically. Because the inputs are wages and tariffs, so it just... It doesn't input goods. It just increases your weekly balance on these things. Which is definitely still want to do a Panama run. It was just kind of a rough start. I don't think research IQ differences is inherently racist, but it does tend to be racist bait and not benefit to society overall. Yeah, so circling back to that, just like briefly, I think most of the people who want to research and reference IQ bases want to do it in such a way that it's like dismissive of certain races or explains different places in society and stuff like this, and I think that is absolutely racist. But the research into the differences themselves, I don't think is inherently racist. I also think that if you think that someone should have a different status on the basis of their IQ being better or worse, in terms of like overall station in society, then what we should do is we should just like test people's IQs and discriminate on the basis of IQ, not on the basis of race. So if there's a correlation between race and IQ, and you think IQ is supremely important, then you should just like IQ test people and have like a thing like that. And so like nobody wants to do that though, because it's really not about the IQ. But still, fundamentally, as a researcher, you should be able to talk about it without ending your career. So, observant intelligence versus pattern intelligence, yeah. In regards to the rush thing, IQ is not dependent on race. Why would you segment using race rather than what it really matters, socioeconomic status or educational level? You can try and control for confounds if you want to do more research. There's definitely like I don't think there's meaningful differences between the race, but like if your goal is to be better at not getting skin cancer, there are definitely some races that are better at it than others, right? If you have more melanin in your skin, you're going to be better at not getting skin cancer. One of the rubs though is if you have more melanin in your skin, it's if you do get skin cancer, it's harder to notice. But like one of the problems is if you can't do the research, you can't disprove the thing, and that's one of the reasons you do research. And so if you control for the variables, right, for when testing IQ, and most of the times you're testing a hypothesis, you're trying to disprove it, right? If you control for the variables and then there's like no difference between race on IQ, then that's like a good thing, right? And so what you want to do is generally when you do any type of psychological research, you do a multivariate analysis. You look at everything. You don't segment just using race, but you're segmenting. You segment based on like 100% of the things you can. When you test someone, you ask them their age, their gender, their race, their like socioeconomic background, and you do it based on everything, and that allows you to also isolate certain things. So like you do multivariate analysis. The thing is, like, what gets into the headlines and this type of stuff is just going to be a single thing, and so that's like what is disingenuous and deceptive is when people report on there being racial differences when the differences, even according to the researcher in the abstract, are better explained by some other factor like income or wealth discrepancy. And you point to the correlation between race, but the let's say there's a correlation between race that's like a 20% correlation or whatever. I think that's not the correct way to represent correlation. It's like p-value or whatever. But if there's like a stronger correlation between income and something, right? Then when you report on it, you should report on the correlation being stronger amongst income, right? But then you just choose selectively to report because you're trying to push a particular narrative. But that's not a problem inherent in the research. That's a problem inherent in the way that like information is being presented, and someone's disingenuously trying to push a certain narrative. Which that's like the problem with the research on like IQ and this type of stuff is it gets used by people to try and push particular narratives. Although this is like maybe like not the tangent to be on. Any tips on how to increase population without immigration? So this is a little bit of a rough one, but you absolutely really, really, really need to get a good health system. And this is going to be the most important one, but also it will be important to get regulatory bodies, so to get rid of dangerous working conditions modifiers. And then you can even branch out into other things like getting the Yeah, let's switch to the UK. Let's switch to USA to show this. Using the generic food company will give you a little bit more pop growth, but I think that the next one that's going to be particularly the next biggest thing that you could do is using the food for principles. So food standardization, which gives more agricultural throughput, and then this minus 10% mortality is like a pretty big deal here. And on top of this, the increased standard of living is also going to improve pop growth up to SOL of 20, at which point it makes it worse. So increasing and decreasing taxes to try and keep your pops kind of around 20 SOL is also going to help with pop growth. You can't judge chainsaws just by analyzing it in isolation. It can add a bunch of economic value as a whole. It does not, and I've not judged it in isolation. There's no even if you take into account the fact that you can now make your oil rigs profitable, whereas you couldn't because the only way to create demand for oil is turning on chainsaws, even if that's the case, it's better to just not build the oil rigs and not use the chainsaws. Like, it is so bad as a PM. It is so bad. Like, it's just awful. The saw, it's terrible. Do you plan on streaming on Labor Day? I don't think so. It's on top, not like this. I don't know what you've talked about so far, but how do you feel about adding a system of private credit? It might add to the economic cycles and change ownership, but it also might take too much resources. I think that's too hard to implement, but I also don't really know. That's not. Can I implement this in terms of performance? Is not something I'm good at answering the question to, because I don't know game development. Super Pedro, thank you for the follow. Big nice. Low IQ people are not very useful to society, but high IQ people are often completely socially dysfunctional and a detriment to society. Psycho and sociopaths are high IQ people. Well, I mean, like, it depends what your society is doing. And depends how low you mean by low IQ. People who are within one standard deviation lower are generally, like, can function as members of society. If you mean people who are, like, below, like, 50 IQ or something like that, then yeah, they're not, like, functional in a way that, like, I mean, they would be diagnosed with something if they're that low in IQ. So it depends what you mean by low and high. High IQ people tend to be antisocial, though, generally speaking. And I would also say, they're probably pretty polarized in how useful they are to society. But, like, it depends what you mean by low IQ. Like, if I could count your IQ on my hands, yeah, you're definitely not going to be useful to society. If I can count your IQ on my fingers, then that means you just don't know how to follow, like, directions categorically because you just were incapable of taking the IQ test, right? Which, if that's the case, you're probably not used to society. Correlation does not mean causality. 100%. I mean, this is another thing. I think that there's a correlation, or there is a correlation between race and IQ. I don't think it's caused by a difference in the races. I think it's caused by, like, like, societal factors just overall. And also, people who have more money, I think, will also tend to do better on IQ. I think that the way the statistic shows up is it's men specifically, like, have more polarized IQs as you increase wealth, which is, like, this really weird thing. Or I was reading something about that, but and this is like also one of the problems is there's like not very good data like literacy. Like if you say that there's a correlation between one race and it being like lower and higher IQ, yeah, that doesn't mean that the race inherently has lower or higher IQ. It just means the manifestation in society they have lower or higher IQ, like within the context of not just their nurture or their nature, but also the nurture. And like the nurture is 100% different, like based on it. But like even if one race, like Ashkenazi Jews, for example, on average score 1 standard deviation higher, which is like way higher. But I don't think that that's like racial. But even if there was a racial difference, it's not like a substantive reason to like treat people different in society, unless you wanted to just test everyone's IQ and then just treat them based on their IQ. Like the IQ is not what's important. It's like people are using it to like to justify wanting to behave poorly towards other people, in my opinion. But also, people should be allowed to research it, and you shouldn't end your career by wanting to talk about it, which is like kind of how it works in psychology right now. Yeah. Is your brother here? It's been 2 hours. That's 100%. I'm trying to clear the chat, and then we're gonna do about it. But talking about IQ is also just like this like crazy tangent that's probably just stupid for me to do, because like if it ends your career in psychology, I just probably shouldn't just like talk about it on stream. I also just think it's really stupid that it ends your career. But like I think most of the people who like want to use IQ and they want to talk about the IQ difference between races, like, and they want to do it, they're like it's not about IQ to them, because they're not of the opinion that you should just test everyone's IQ and you should just like throw out the people who have like however many standard deviations below the norm. Technically, pop growth peaks before 20 SOL, since birth rates and mortality are higher at lower SOL to begin with. Minus mortality and minus birth rates, it peaks a bit earlier. I mean, I'd have to take a look at this like math specifically. I haven't taken a look at the math, but I also trust the dev who specifically works on the pop growth algorithm, who said it was at 20 SOL. If you're talking about the fact that your SOL is going to be different amongst your society and the stratification is going to mean that this number is going to not be 20, I would agree with that. But my understanding is that at 20, it's going to have the best like rate, unless you have additional modifiers. If you're talking about additional modifiers, then that's like also a different thing. Is that so? Oil rigs have such an awesome PM. You are dying for a reason to use oil, but you're effectively hemorrhaging all the construction you spent on wood just to do it. And so it's like, it's so disgustingly inefficient that like, it's not worth hemorrhaging that. You can be very good at what you do with a low IQ and the other way around. I also like, yeah, I agree with, like, I think there's a lot of things that people with low IQs can do well, but like, also, there's like, having low IQ also correlates with like other things, right, that you can have cognitively that are like not good and cause you to be low functioning in society. And I'm not aware of like all the intricacies of that like type of discussion in terms of like at what IQ average do people just generally not be productive. The comment's not entirely like dismissing, but like no race scores like more than a standard deviation outside the norm as far as I know. So you're talking about 85 and 115, and someone who's 85 IQ is like definitely functional in society. And if you're talking about 70, now you're talking about a different thing, or like it's a completely different sort of discussion. Or if you're talking about, you know, what's the one under 70 is like 55 IQ. If you're talking about 55 IQ, right, like 3 standard deviations below the mean, like that's such a small fraction of society. Now we're not remotely talking about differences like between like race. We're just talking about IQ, which is fair enough. But yeah, that extreme is what you mean? Yeah, if you're talking about someone who has like 30 IQ or like, you know, insanely low. Yeah, I think we're gonna try and So 70 to or 50 to lower also tend to be generally on downward spirals due to succumbing to manipulation and societal issues more easily. I think there's also a problem that like there's like correlations with other stuff you have going on with IQ and the other stuff you're going on. Like it is difficult to have like an Alaska temp IQ. You know, like in the 30s or whatever, or below 0 is impossible. But like you have to have some. I think you have to have other things going on as well. I love when these streams turn into organic philosophical discussion. This is probably just getting me in huge trouble. I think this video probably just gets demonetized because I talked about IQ and race like together, which is stupid. The thing is like the amount of difference you would have to notice like between like IQ and like race and IQ such that you would like want to treat people different would just have to be like enormous, and there's like nowhere near that. And like it's just like there are people who have formed an opinion about other races that just want to use that as a tool, and I understand that, but that doesn't mean that like the like researchers shouldn't be allowed to like talk about it without like ending their career. And also the guy who like put forward the study and wrote the book on it, his overall conclusion was he thought it was based on societal factors, and he still got eviscerated. I forget his name, or maybe it was, I think it might have been two guys, I can't remember, but they studied the difference and they're like, look, we think that this is just cultural factors, and still it didn't matter. Like the career was over. And like since then no one touches it in psychology, which like I'm also not dying on the hill to like study the differences between race and IQ. I don't care that much, like but I do think it's silly that like it's just like career ending. Cultural influence it is with the Jews. When you read a book you memorize it like 1,000 times and you're thrown the other book, it will be easier to memorize it. Wait, what? Yeah, I mean I think it has to do with culture. I've taken an IQ test to diagnose ADHD. It blows my mind that some people take them just to brag about the score. I don't know, like a lot of people, when I was teaching chess to kids, a lot of the kids that were there, they like wanted to learn chess, not actually because they were like, were interested in the game as much as they were like interested in appearing as an intellectual. And there's a lot of things that people do to just appear as intellectuals, like argue with each other. So, like a lot of people just argue just to seem more intelligent, and it's more about winning than to form some sort of conclusion. And a lot of people play chess just to look intelligent, at least initially, and then you start liking the chess or learn to solve Rubik's Cube or this type of stuff. It is 100% self-esteem related. I think it's more complicated. I think that that's a little dismissive because people are also trying to formulate an identity, and like if you have an identity as being like an intellectual, then you're attracted to like, you know, pillars to have a thing. Yeah. 70 IQ is brutally low. 2 standard deviations is a very small percentage of the population, yeah. And then if we're talking about 55, that's way, way better. It's at 20 without healthcare for minus mortality. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I know it's... I haven't done the math to like fully optimize, but yeah, okay, when you're introducing modifiers, it's going to change. I don't know what the number is though. It's also like going to change because it's different. Being above and being below, one is worse / better than the other. Like being above is better, so you probably want your standard of living to be slightly above 20 as well, not including other modifiers. High IQ people are more prone to fall for conspiracy theories, actually. That doesn't surprise me, but I think that's because probably more to do with them being more socially isolationary and that correlating with conspiracy theories than necessarily them like not being able to critically think through. Are you talking about the bell curve book? Yeah. I thought it was a racist one, but I could be misremembering. It might be the bell curve that I'm talking about. I can't remember the name of the book. The point is the guy's overall conclusion, as far as I understand, I haven't directly read the book myself, but I've read like summaries and like or like I've heard people talk about it. His overall conclusion is that he thinks that culture influences IQ, and this is the explanation, not that like one race is better at IQ tests. Some races are much more higher IQ than others. Just look at F1 and NASCAR, dude. Wait, what? Oh, yeah. Your intentions aren't everything, to be fair. If your research serves only to advance racist rhetoric, why shouldn't you be criticized? When you do research on almost anything in psychology, you do like multivariate analysis. You look at like every variable you could possibly look at. If you're researching IQ and you can ask people their race, I think you just should. Like, just in the way that stuff is just executed in terms of like research, you should just look at everything you possibly can. And right now in psychology, my understanding, anyone who's researching IQ doesn't look at race, but I'm not deep in that sauce. I could be mistaken, but like you're asking gender. Like if there was a difference between the genders in terms of like IQ, like we would have like a similar thing. And people argue that there is a difference in genders, but like when you control for, and this is the problem, is like they argue that it's like more polarized for men. So men tend to be higher and lower on the IQ spectrum. But my understanding is when you actually control and you like exclude people who are really wealthy, that polarization goes away. So like men who come from wealthy upbringings tend to be more polarized, is my understanding, in terms of IQ. But like, I think that you wanting to exclude something from your multivariate analysis because it's because someone might use it in a particular way is like not in the service of science. It's not that like people like specifically are necessarily researching differences between IQ and race. They're researching differences in IQ across like an entire multivariate analysis. Hating the faraway races is easy. The thing, hating your neighbor nation looks 90% like you. That's real racism. But like, also like, yeah, you can get funded and like this type of stuff. I'm not saying it should be wholly unproblematic to like research IQ. I think it shouldn't end your career to research and report on something. And also, when the guys who first noticed it, or the guy, I can't remember, I think it's fair to report on it if you notice a difference. Have you seen studies that quality of education is so bad that literacy is falling? Yeah. Students get better grades after getting whole food, plant-based diet. Yeah, getting nutrition makes you have way better outcomes just overall. Which is why I think one of the better forms of philanthropy, like people are sending like desks to kids in Africa. It's like stupid. You should send multivitamins, because like your nutrition during like your cognitive development is like so important, and like your nutrition correlates with like your income. So like if there's a difference between income among races and you don't control for it, and then you notice a difference in like the explanation's probably income. Yeah. But race is a bullshit concept, not scientific at all. Do we do research based on astrological signs as well? I mean, there are differences in between races on like some things. Like, if you have more melanin content in your skin, and this is just like the most like obvious one, then like you will be better at like resisting the sun. There's like a village in China that Yao Ming and Wang Zhiji are from, and they're just like taller. There's like differences in races based on height. Like, to say that there's no difference between race is like, that's crazy. Is there a difference between IQ based on race? I don't think so. I mean, I really don't think so. But it's also possible, and you can't exclude nature versus nurture based on race. Like, one of the things that they do to exclude it is, like, paired twin studies. You can't do a paired twin study where you have two different races. And also there are problems with paired twin studies in that people treat twins differently than they do non-twins. And will tend to treat twins more similarly to each other, and so this causes confounding variables. But, like, if you just like categorically like say that there can't be a difference based on race when there like are more manifest physically obvious differences based on like I don't think it follows. I think that I don't think there's a substantive difference between IQ based on races, and even if there wasn't, it's not a reason to treat people differently. Unless you want to treat everyone who has a different IQ differently. But that's not what people are talking about. That's not what people are focused on. People are focused on the race, not the IQ. And so like anyone who's like if you're having a discussion with people, someone like I have a lot of discussions with like people who in the sauna, and like a lot of them like are conservative leaning and like come out with like, well, who commits all the crime, huh? And like and then they talk about IQ afterwards, and it's like I know what they're trying to say, but like if you invite those people and you ask them, hey, do you think everyone under a certain IQ should just have to wear a badge that designates the IQ and should be banned from some jobs? They'll say no. And then it's like, well, what point are you trying to make then? Like, and it's obviously they're like from a racial like thing. I've seen it distributed higher capacity to theorize about connections of unrelated things. That's why smart people might get into conspiracy theories, slippery slope. Oh, maybe. That's possible. I think I would guess it'd be more antisocial, but you could control for that and maybe do a study on it. That maybe be interesting. Race could be based on phenotypical differences, but also on cultural differences. It's not really a scientific thing. Yeah, but there are, like, there's a reason why in the Olympics, Ethiopia does, like, really, really, really well on all the running. And part of it is because they're a plateau, it's, like, high elevation and this type of thing. But also part of it is that they have really good genetics for running really well. Like, it's not, like, a cultural differences in terms of, that are causing the people from, like, Yao Ming's village to all be tall. Does race mean skin pigmentation, or is some studying the IQ of Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons? I think it's mainly skin pigmentation, but, like, you can have different people with differently ethnic backgrounds that have, like, the same pigmentation or similar pigmentation. So it's not... I'm talking about genetic differences. But genetic differences, the problem with psychology is almost entirely self-report as it relates to race. And so you're also having to infer real genetic differences based on perhaps what people like report, and people can report incorrectly. And people who are mixed are probably more likely to report certain things than others based on like culture. And like you would have to try and figure out a way to like control for that and this type of stuff. I think even chess, men versus women statistics can be explained by social factors. Yeah, Judith Polgar, like, crushes. I think she's, like, the biggest data point. Not just Judith, but also her sisters. Just absolutely insane chess players. And you can, like, the women can't be good at chess thing, I think is stupid. I think it's almost entirely societal why like, women don't perform that well on chess. And Judith Polgar, to her credit, was never female world champion. The reason why is she refused to compete against men because she thought it was, like, degrading and stupid. And she played for, like, the world championship for the men. Not in the finals, but she was part of the candidates. It seems to me that there would be a tiny but real IQ difference between races on the magnitude of, like, 100ths of an IQ. Yeah, which if that is the case, which I have no idea because you can't separate the nature and the nurture, it's, like, it's not a substantive, like, argument of why people should be treated differently. Even if it was a full standard deviation, it's not a substantive argument, because within a group, like, even if one were a full standard deviation different, within a group, they're still going to have a ton of people that are, like, higher and lower IQ. And it's also fundamentally people, yeah, it's like, if you want to care about the IQ, you can care about the IQ. Aren't all the Kenyan runners from one tribe? Yes. This is the point I'm trying to make, is, like, if you want to tell me that, like, that's not genetic, that's just, like, it's obviously genetic, but we're talking about something that's a mental capacity. Also, like, I think overall the most genetic diversity is still in Africa, so, like, if there is someone who has the highest IQ, it's almost certainly some tribe in Africa. Like, when you control for upbringing, which also influences IQ, because, like, in terms of the number of, like, splinters off the branch, in terms of human history, like, more splintering has happened in Africa than, like, the tribes that, like, migrated to these other areas, that, like, started getting the different pigmentation. It's a jump to presume genetics. The altitude is a much simpler explanation, or it might be a cultural thing. Well, you know who isn't really good at, like, running? People in here. And also, I mean, I'm assuming genetics with the height. Height, I do not have an explanation other than genetics. Why everyone from Yao Ming's village is over 6 feet tall. And there's a ton of people who live at elevation, like, similar to Ethiopia, and do not ascend out of a village of, like, 2,000 people, a ton of Olympians. Baselessly assuming race, yeah, okay. Those are genetic differences. I read on, like, racism and race. Fanon talks about that a lot. Yeah, but you, in the context of psychology, where you have someone self-report what race they are, like, I understand that race is, like, a cultural construction, but it's, like, a cultural construction that's, like, superimposed over, like, a very strong correlation to genetic differences. Also, Ethiopians would be called black, same as black people and Americans or Senegal or Cameroon. Well, there's not, like, a delineation that is, like, strong in terms of, like, U.S. culture based on, like, what's going on over here. Like, everyone in China to the U.S. is all called Chinese, but, like, you definitely have differences, like, in China. I don't want to say condescending, but I'm really interested in. No, I mean, like, I'm trying to talk about it from the perspective of, like, psychology, where you, like, I've read, like, a ton of philosophy theory on, like, race. I'm not talking about it from the perspective of, like, the philosophy theory. I'm talking about it from the perspective of, like, psychology. Like, in terms of the usage of the word. Like, different disciplines use words in different ways. There's a lot of genetic difference in Africa. Grouping black people as one thing is just colonist legacy. Yeah, I understand. That's, like, kind of what I was getting at anyways. Top women stop playing chess after puberty. Not all of them. What? Women being less interested in chess is, like, also, I think that that's probably the case, but anyways. I'm racialized in the US, but not in my home country. For example, race is 100% cultural, but it can be based on genetic differences or not. Bro, if it's 100% cultural, then it can't be based on genetic differences. What do you mean? Like, if race is not real, then why do whites play first in chess? Yeah, basically. Chess was invented in India. It's like... But this is out in the weeds. I just shouldn't discuss, like, race and IQ, because it's like... I also think that people who are obsessed with that type of discussion are generally not people I want to talk with, so... Swedes weren't considered white. Yeah, but you're not, you guys aren't understanding this, like, the points of difference between talking about something from, like, a psychology perspective versus, like, a, like, race theory perspective. You shouldn't talk about this on Twitch. You get banned for the smallest thing here. Also, hi. Yeah. Hey. Yeah. But let's answer the one Victoria 3 question and then be done with it, I see. Why does the AI sit on investment pool allow hundreds of millions late game even though there's thousands of spare construction for them to use? They generally just don't build enough construction. And this is the primary problem, why they can't drain the investment pool. Super late game, if they did have like tens of thousands of construction, I guess we'll spoil a little bit of what's going on in Finland. If they do have a ton of construction, like super late game, one problem is they don't build proactively enough infrastructure to use the investment pool. But if we like take a look here, Russia just doesn't have enough construction. This is not anywhere near enough construction. Let's talk about phrenology. Let's not. But yeah, they just don't have enough construction. Anyways, we're gonna wrap up the stream. Thanks for coming out. Probably shouldn't have gotten in the weeds on that. Like, yeah, I was just like, it's like so stupid. People should, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'm just thinking like what conversations I like want to have on stream or not. It's probably just like a silly one in retrospect to talk about, because like nothing like good comes from it, right? I'm like zooming in on the US because I know about all the US studies that were like trying to show differences. The intention behind a lot of those studies is like trying to show differences between race, and like I think if your study is like is like racist in intent, then I don't like the study. But like also if it's not racist in intent and one of the multivariate things that it studies is race, and then you notice a difference and you report on it, that shouldn't end your career. We're talking about race as determined by self-report in like a psychology test when they were doing a background thing, not race as terms of like philosophical discussion of like the otherizing and like tribalism and like this type of stuff, and like you know, the gaze of being perceived as the other, like the wait, Slavs are colored people. We're not supposed to say colored. We're supposed to say people of color. But like, yeah. All right, yeah. I'm gonna get trapped in the weeds. I want to hang out with my brother. Take care, everyone. Bye bye now. Oh, maybe.